All right, so back to what I was saying. I was saying that if you were to strip everything away from a dependent woman, now I have to explain to you something about the premise to this theory. The assumption is that an independent woman cannot express elegance in the sense that they're not seeking, they're trying to get their own needs met, their own wants met, and if there's attraction involved, it's more primitive than anything else. So basically, one of the things I noticed I wrote down about this theory is that this is an evolutionary thing. And by primitive, I mean that if you're attracted to someone, it's mostly based on more fundamental things about the opposite sex. So elegant theory is more about a psychological manipulation, and it goes way beyond a primitive sort attraction. So basically, anytime anyone has a crush, it's actually not. It goes way beyond a primitive state. So I mean, that's kind of like arguable, but some people might disagree with that. But that's kind of like where it came from, because throughout my life, everyone has told me like, oh yeah, you have feelings for this person because, maybe because you're horny or something, and to that extent, it's kind of true, but it's not really. But when it comes to crushes and things like that, and trying to get into and having these psychological attachments that you have, there's no way that it's just primitive based. If it's primitive based, obviously it has to do with you see ass and you want it. You want to bone the shit out of it. Okay, now that's primitive, but this kind of attraction is it almost can't be primitive. If it is primitive, then this whole argument is flawed. But there's no way that it's primitive. In other words, it has to come from some kind of psychological evolution, or an evolution. Psychological evolution. So. Maybe, perhaps 2,000 years ago or something like that. I mean, 1,000 years ago, this wasn't so developed, and perhaps men back then were unable to be attached to any woman throughout their life for any long period of time, and perhaps there were no conscious effort involved with that, and you know what I mean. So nowadays, it's like you always talk to these men there, and including myself back in the day, we always get attached to women as if it goes way beyond a primitive thing, and yet they seem kind of stupid that they're making this decision. It's got to have something to do with some kind of psychological manipulation, and hence my elegance theory. So basically, if you strip everything away from a dependent woman, that includes, providing food, shelter, and or maybe not shelter, but anything that she would manipulate another person over. If you strip all that away, all you see is just some like a dog in the corner, and who's just trying to beg for something, and it always happens that way. So whenever you feel like you have a crush on someone, just imagine what it would be like if you were actually with them, because that's the end. That's where it converges to. It always happens that way. If you end up liking someone and then you end up going out with them, you might fuck them 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and then after the first fuck, it'll immediately get to you, and your mind state might even change. That manipulation factor is just completely gone. Those images you once had are no longer there. Now the reality is in your mind, which is this quote unquote whore, not really a whore, just this person who's worthless. So, that happens a lot, and it has nothing to do with, contrary to what feminism women think, it has nothing to do with a porn addiction or the fact that the woman let him have sex. See, that's what I'm saying. The elegance theory is also tied to feminism, because the whole concept that women are trying to suppress all these desires of men, and it goes way beyond just trying to stop them from abusing and being primitive. It goes into trying to have the greater ability to psychologically manipulate men. That's basically what the part of the elegance theory provides evidence for, or surmising for. So surmises for. So hopefully that makes sense. So basically, imagine anybody that you've once liked or closely had a crush on. Imagine what you feel later, right? It's like, wow, it's a complete change, because you only liked them when they were giving off good vibes when you were around them, and now they're just a piece of shit, and they're just a piece of shit. Like, I can go back and I can realize all the people I like. Like, man, that person's just a piece of shit. I just like look at some of their photos and I'm like, God damn, what was I thinking? And so in my perspective, it has to do with that elegance theory, which is the psychological manipulation. So my theory has to be consistent with the fact that only dependent women can exert this, and if you're independent, you're so it is an unconscious thing, but it's more psychological than primitive, or basic, whatever you want to call it. So it's more psychological, and it requires a little bit more intelligence. So a lot of people don't realize just how manipulative. A lot of women don't realize how manipulative they're being, and it's just evolutionary. I think women have to come to terms with the fact that that they're doing this, and it's driving men insane. It really is. I mean, I've met people like, just look at, what's that guy's name again? I forget his name. Santa Barbara killer drove him insane. So this is kind of the reason, but yeah, I can't really say much about the elegance theory. It seems pretty straightforward to me. But just kind of reflect on all the women, and imagine like, even in the split second, if you start feeling that way about someone in a split second, you have to be very, very you have to combat it in a very warrior-like sense. You have to say, no, you are just being psychologically manipulative. You're just a piece of shit. That's all you are. That's the best way to handle most women. Because in any environment, you're almost able to adapt that way, and be manipulated that way, and it's not a good thing. It's 99.9% a deceptive thing, and you're a lot better off just determining elements that you like of a woman, and just trying to find an independent woman who's not, who by definition cannot be, is not going to have that elegance about her, and who is basically not looking to manipulate people so that they can suck on them, suck and get things from them and for free, you know. And so, you know, a lot of women claim they're independent, but it's clear that they're highly dependent on trying to on that manipulation factor, and feminism is the greatest way to influence this. It's because you're getting a group of people that are trying to get an image of what a woman should be and what they should have, but at the end of the day, if they're not independent, they're just a piece of shit on the ground. Might as well, you know. And well, without manipulation, that is. So, you know, why would anybody try to advocate for this? But you know, so far I've encountered quite a many independent women, and you know, they're not bad. I mean, I'd say you're going to find more of them in foreign areas. You have a better chance at finding them in foreign countries. So that's what I'm trying to do. But what am I thinking? The U.S., you're almost never going to find them. You might find some that look like independent types, but most of the time it's you have to reevaluate it and say, oh yeah, they're just using that manipulation technique. It's nothing more than that. For example, I remember this woman in the church that I met when I went to church back in the day. You know, whenever I talked to her, she seemed to smile a lot, and she seemed quite independent whenever I talked to her. But it was, and this has happened with quite a many Christian ladies. When I talk to them, they seem quite independent, and it seems like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, everything's fine, up until the point where, what was it? Up until the point where they're basically, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but a lot of them, that I used to meet, it's more about going back to a group. So essentially, they're only talking to you because of a obligation, and so it's pretty clear to you. It should be pretty clear at that point, if you know it's just some obligation they have, that they're not being independent because they're not being independent because they know they have to latch back onto the group with which they associate with. So I think that's pretty clear to me. You know, I think perhaps you've met these kind of people or these kind of women where they have no intention of talking to you ever again. And it could have something to do with what you said, but it shouldn't matter what you said, because if they're not an independent type, they're although they might sound like it, you know, they talk to you and then they ask these smart questions. They're just dependent on the group that they associate with. So it's not really that great. Although the independent types that I've met are just struggling. So the real independent types, they're kind of struggling, and so sometimes they don't really have time to talk to you, but but I'm sure like it would work out. Because they're you know, they're working really hard, and they're not relying on anything to keep their manipulation tactics clear. They're not relying on that at all. They realize it's not a good thing. That they would rather they see the better part of them. because they know that. I mean, I don't know where it comes from, but they're very rare. Most of them though are in the foreign countries, like I said. So I would recommend going to a foreign country and find someone like that, the independent types. So I don't really know many people in the U.S. that are like that, except maybe the ones I went to school, some of the ones I went to school with. But I mean, they're independent, but they're a different type of nastiness. They're, oh God, it's really hard to really hard to explain, but it's like, let me think about it. So when I talk to them, these people, or these women, it's almost like they're in between dependent and independent. Because they're, I don't know. Well, actually, they're one of the worst types that are deceptively dependent. In other words, they look independent, but they're actually dependent because they're sycophants to frats and stuff like that for the most part. But I have to tell you one thing. All right. So far, I know that I met this Chinese lady, Chinese chick, whatever you want to call her, right? She goes to school with me, and she's doing the same major as me. And she decided she wanted to study with me. I was a little bit surprised because I immediately saw her as a dependent for a while, and so I thought, fuck this bitch, right? But before you know it, she actually came up to me, we started talking to each other, and I'm always trying to be objective. If she's trying to be objective, let's be objective, right? So we talk sometimes about the structural mechanics, advanced structural analysis, and she was telling me she was stuck on stiffness method, and I don't feel that I'm that smart. I feel that I have to ask a lot of questions, and I would have to ask her a lot of questions. It doesn't matter whether they're independent or not. If they can answer the questions and you can discuss this information, great. But she invited me to, by the way, she's from China. She's not from U.S. So just heads up, this is proof that, partially proof that she's independent. So, or that she's a good pick because she's independent. So she invited me to, study with her, and as we were together, she didn't go out and say she liked me, or anything like that. But I mean, obviously that would be cliche, and that would go along with the manipulation thing. But she was really attached. She really liked spending time with me, and it wasn't a spontaneous quality at all. It wasn't even the kind where you're constantly thinking about them a lot. Because I don't think about her a lot, but it's just this the fact that it just seems so genuine makes me want to. It makes me think that she's probably an independent person who actually is attracted to me in ways that are not like that are not have nothing to do with manipulation tactics. And vice versa. So, because she and I are, we discuss things and we relate to each other, and it was. I don't think this was a manipulation tactic at all. When she talks to me, I don't think it was. On the other hand, I mean, you could try to argue that if she sees me as being really smart, that she's just trying to manipulate me. But I'm telling you, okay. I am not that smart. When I talk to her, she actually answers a lot of my questions. And so I think this is actually genuine. So she seems like a pretty good pick as far as a potential mate. But my point is that not every woman you're going to meet, especially foreigners, are going to be that dependent type. and you'll if you can meet like a foreigner or something like that, you'll start to see what I mean about the difference between a dependent type and an independent type, and the manipulation tactics that you can start to get into apart from the independent type, and you could try to compare it with that. Now, I'm perfectly fine not being with her. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, and even if I find out she has a boyfriend, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, she doesn't, but there's nothing wrong with that. The whole point of it is that she sees me compatible in a way that is not, and that has nothing to do with needing something. In fact, and so that's the whole idea. In fact, it's because she just sees an actual connection. Because that's the whole idea of a relationship, right? Is that you want to have a good connection between someone and whatever that might be, and you want to feel as though you're together with them on some kind of quest or something like that. That could be your feeling, but it's mostly just about connection in general. And so, the elegance theory is basically that you connect, the guy is going to connect with the image they see them as rather than the person themselves. And that's what crushes are all about. They're never about anything else. This idea of a crush or someone you like, it's always that way, because and then the connection happens afterwards, and then that crush goes away, that image goes away, and so there's essentially no point in it, because the only point in it ever was for the woman to manipulate the man. That's the only point it ever had. So, but I'm just trying to give you some of you hope that you can actually, you don't have to be MGTOW or anything like that, but that there's actually actual true connections that you can make, and you don't have to necessarily be idealistic about it either. See, she and I know, the Asian chick and me, and I know that it's good to be realistic. So, obviously, if we know that we have to part ways for a while, then we will, and it won't be a big deal. Or if I know that she's, if we're both good at cooking, we're going to try to make a system out of that. So that's going to work. That should work out pretty well if it ever does. So I guess I'll update you about this if it ever happens. But that's the whole idea with foreigners. There's none of this bullshit and manipulation tactics. No elegance about it. It is an evolutionary thing, but it can also depend, I don't know, on the environmental evolution. I mean, that it's not really innate. So, yeah, I don't know. So hopefully this makes sense. See ya.